The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. Prologue, The Journey to the World of Ruin. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. September 18, 2015. Prologue, The Journey to the World of Ruin. A dream. Everything that had transpired within the last 24 hours must have been nothing but a dream, and I was about to awaken from it. Yet, it seems this is nothing but wishful thinking on my part, for I was in a situation that could be best described as the worst moment of my entire life. Deep down, I knew this was real because I had been warned about it after what happened last time, and while it was on my mind, I was fixated on my life in the human world, which has gotten a lot better in recent months. Fate sure has a funny way of making its mark, but if there was any solace to be found, it would be the fact that I wasn't entirely alone in my ordeal. Then again, I wish that she didn't have to deal with this problem because I was the one fated to deal with the crisis. Actually, it's not the exact crisis which had been told to me by Ganondorf, who bested me in combat. No, it was something completely different which caught me by surprise. Just when I thought I had figured out one world, I get flung into another one that plays by its own set of rules. My name is Sunset Shimmer, and for as long as I can remember, I was a magical unicorn from a world inhabited by ponies among other creatures. I exiled myself to another world where I took on human form out of sheer anger towards my former mentor, Princess Celestia, all because I followed the advice of a mirror rather than stick with my studies. During my adventures in the human world, I was able to achieve a form that is a combination of my two appearances, yet no sooner had I found myself in the situation that had been placed upon me. Well, I wasn't prepared to face the reality of having been forced to undergo a transformation into a different creature. What made things even worse was that this was due to a dark power which was being used by someone who may or may not understand just what they are getting themselves into.
I feel strange. That's because my magic has changed you, and personally for the better, I might add. What do you mean? Rather than having me waste my time explaining things to you, why don't you just take a look at your reflection in that pool of water in front of you? I'm sure you'll get a real kick out of it once you've seen what I've done to make you more appealing. Like I should believe that. It's not surprising to hear you say something like that given what I've already put you through, in addition to spouting a few lies in an attempt to get you to leave me alone, and find another horse and instrument to call your own. However, in this case, I am telling the truth, so I suggest you look down at your reflection. Wah! Do you hear that beautiful sound, Tattle? Tail? That's the sound of someone whose very existence has been turned upside down. What have you done to me? Your previous expression and form looked so boring, and you were nothing short of tense, all because you kept on yammering about not wanting to be here again. So, I decided to give you a complete makeover. The results speak for themselves, as this look really suits you, but I doubt the people in town will be thrilled having another scrub running around. I'm a Deku scrub. And this is a form which is going to last the rest of your life, so I hope that you quickly get adjusted to it. Of course, you've got plenty of problems already considering what I've already done, and now chalk this one up as another addition. Getting rid of that annoying horse was worth it, for I doubt it will be of any use to a mere scrub, but maybe you'll find it one day if you survive. As for this ocarina which you gladly gave to me, I'm sure to get better as I continue practicing, and it already sounds better than my flute. Change me back right now. What? Now, why would I go and do a thing like that? Like I said, this look really suits you. Well, I don't like it. Unfortunately, your opinion doesn't count. I would stay here and make you suffer more humiliation, but I've got things to do, and people to see. Besides, I need to get Tattle away from you, as she is getting rather anxious, which is beginning to get annoying. She's been acting that way ever since we first ambushed you back in the woods, so we'll take our leave before things go south. I hope you enjoy your new life, and I do have one good piece of advice as a parting gift. You might want to stay away from dogs because they have a tendency to attack Deku scrubs. Wait. Come back. Sorry, but I've more important things to do. Stop. Have fun with your new life. I'm not going to let you get away with this. Was that a threat? Ha. That has to be the cutest thing I've ever heard, and coming from you it sounds even more adorable. You don't have the means to defeat me as my power is far greater than anything you could muster up, so I recommend you back off before I lose my good humor. Still, you have proven to be quite resourceful, which was unexpected. Why don't I show just how strong I can be? Okay, but don't come crying to me when you lose everything.
Being changed into a Deku scrub was perhaps the lowest moment of my life, and has personally tied with me abandoning my studies with Princess Celestia to pursue my own path. Just when I thought that things were about to get even worse, a miracle occurred which made this ordeal much more bearable. I tried to follow this mysterious person who was wearing the most bizarre mask imaginable, but I was stopped by one of their 2 fairy companions who attacked me. It turned out that this fairy was someone really close to me, and who was aware of the fact that neither of us were meant to be in this place. And yet, she wasn't completely whole like me, as she had some memories of my new surroundings. I suppose that I should explain how I ended up in this situation in the first place, for it would ease my mind knowing that I shared such a painful tale with those who have a sympathetic ear. Before all of this started, I was living in the human world where I was continuing to understand friendship, but I would be lying if I said that everything was perfect. It had been several months since my adventure in Hyrule, which only I remember, as everyone else had no memories, and I had been experiencing dreams which all consisted of the exact same thing. I was in some kind of strange world that was on the verge of ruin, and before I could do anything to help, a large burst of flame consumes everything. This results in me being consumed by the flame, which is where I wake up with sweat dripping down my face, which follows with me struggling to get back to sleep, and it has taken a real toll on my body, both physically and mentally. My friends often asked me if I was okay, for it became obvious to them that something was wrong, yet I couldn't tell them what's wrong because they wouldn't believe it. There was no doubt that it related to the warning given to me by Ganondorf, but I had no idea as to how long I could keep going before I completely lose my sanity. My friends tried everything they could to keep my mind off my problem, but sadly their efforts were in vain, as the dreams only got worse as time went on. What was perhaps the most discouraging part involved Pinkie Pie's attempt at what she called the grandest sleepover in the history of ever, yet this didn't make me feel better, even though everyone had an amazing time, but then I wished that fate had dealt me a different hand instead of what I was given. Despite the concerns of my friends, I managed to keep my spirits up, which was all I could do really, yet deep down there was the fear of the unknown. Ganondorf's warning. Those haunting words were about to become my worst nightmare. It had been about 2 weeks since the Friendship Games were held, which saw Canterlot competing against Crystal Prep, yet I was able to maintain my focus despite my dreams tormenting me. Rainbow Dash had orchestrated a celebration where students from both schools were to attend, despite how both sides were at incredible odds during the games, but I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. I don't blame Rainbow Dash for what she had planned, for how could she have known what happened to the human world? She had been keeping her plan a secret, but when the big unveiling happened where everyone in attendance experienced her surprise, the only one who wasn't happy about the situation was me. To be honest, I was hoping that she would have chosen something different rather than what she had selected, but again this was fate.
I have no doubt in my mind that this is the most awesome idea I've had,
said Rainbow Dash as she couldn't contain her excitement, but if she had been in my shoes then she wouldn't be feeling so much adrenaline. Instead, she would be fearful of what could potentially happen, and would try to run away before anything could go wrong.
Well, you did say that you wanted to have a party complete with enough video game consoles of various kinds, I said. It took some real work on my end, but it was worth it because this party is sure to last all night,
shouted Rainbow Dash.
Maybe you could have done something more low-key, I suggested. Hey? Why would I do that? I do have a reputation to maintain Sunset Shimmer, and if word got out that I would do something that wasn't awesome and epic, no one would ever be able to look at me in the same light again,
said Rainbow Dash. While it looked as though she was completely full of herself, she noticed the expression on my face, and decided to comfort me because she suspected that my condition related to my dreams.
Are you still suffering from that dream of yours? Most dreams would have ended after a couple of days, but this one has lasted several months. Are you sure that you're okay? Is it that obvious?
I asked.
You look as though you're about to collapse from exhaustion, and many have been wondering what's wrong with you. The girls and I have been the most worried considering how close-knit we've become since the Battle of the Bands, but it feels like we're just hitting nothing but straw given that you haven't exactly explained why you keep having the same dream,
replied Rainbow Dash.
It's complicated, I began. We're here for you, Sunset Shimmer, but we can't do anything until you tell us, said Rainbow Dash. I really want to, but I doubt you'll believe me, I said. Seriously? You've been keeping it to yourself just because you think we won't believe it? After all we've seen at this school, what with you becoming a demonic monster who wanted to conquer Equestria, a singing group who wanted to steal our energy just because they wanted people to adore them, and having the best friendship games in recent memory between CHS and Crystal Prep, I'm sure we can handle whatever it is you're dealing with,"
said Rainbow Dash. In all of my misery, I had completely forgotten about all of these scenarios which have plagued the human world, and of course I was the reason this place has witnessed so many problems from Equestria. If I had chosen to remain in the place of my birth and just waited patiently to achieve greatness, this world wouldn't have suffered because of it, but then friendship would never have entered my heart, and I would probably be some kind of demonic pony, right now. Rainbow Dash noticed that I was daydreaming from her perspective, and felt the need to shout into my ear.
Hello? Aren't you going to say something? There's no need for shouting,
I moaned.
With so many students shouting already, my voice has been lost in the confusion,
said Rainbow Dash.
Oh,
I said.
So tell me about this dream of yours,
suggested Rainbow Dash. Just as I was about to say something, Applejack came up to us as she had managed to overhear the general gist of our conversation, and the expression on her face showed that she didn't like Rainbow Dash asking me something personal.
"Y'all don't need to give her any more pressure,"
said Applejack.
"I'm not,"
shouted Rainbow Dash.
"We all know that Sunset Shimmer has been having problems with that dream of hers, but we don't need to pressure her into explaining what it is, especially if it's difficult to actually even explain. Look, I know you just want to help Rainbow Dash, but you can't force her to do something she ain't comfortable with. I'm sure in due course she will share with us, so for now all we can do is buck up, and enjoy this party of yours,"
said Applejack. That was when I decided that I would explain, for a part of me agreed with Rainbow Dash, which was everyone around here had seen unbelievable things already. The rest of me just wanted to keep it all to myself, but I couldn't keep it up for much longer, yet now that I think about it, I shouldn't have hesitated. If I had chosen to simply go home at that exact moment, what ended up happening to me wouldn't have occurred, and everyone wouldn't have been dragged into my problem. Instead of leaving in hopes of defying fate, I took both Applejack and Rainbow Dash elsewhere so as to avoid all the noise, and proceeded to explain what was wrong. It took me quite some time to explain, as I didn't want to leave out any details, and my friends listened to every word I said as though they were mesmerized.
"And that is everything that happened,"
I finished after what felt like forever.
"Oh. Wow,"
said Rainbow Dash as she struggled to come to grips with my story.
"That certainly was some story,"
said Applejack as she took off hat in order to scratch her head.
"I told you that you wouldn't believe me,"
I sighed.
"Well, it is a difficult tale to take in all at once, but both of us believe you,"
smiled Applejack.
"You do?"
I asked.
"Weird things have been happening around here throughout these past months, so what you just explained to us most likely happened, and it does explain why no one else apart from you has any recollection of those events," replied Applejack. "I always wanted to become a part of a video game world, yet I don't remember it,"
moaned Rainbow Dash.
"Not helping Rainbow Dash,"
shouted Applejack. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders when I finished explaining my story, but I could tell that my friends were still having doubts about it, as though something was holding them back. If only they could remember the events of Hyrule like I did, for that would make this moment seem less awkward than it really was, but they don't, which is why they feel uneasy. Applejack then put her hat back on her head, and proceeded to speak as no one else was willing to.
"I'll be sure to let Pinkie Pie, Fluttershy, and Rarity know about this story Sunset Shimmer, but I think they'll be just as confused as we are." "What about that warning from that guy?"
asked Rainbow Dash.
"You mean Ganondorf?"
I asked.
"Yeah, him,"
replied Rainbow Dash.
"He said that my journey had only just begun, and that fate had chosen me to travel to a different world sometime in the future. This world would be on the verge of ruin, and I am to save it before it gets destroyed. At first, I chose to simply ignore his words when everything changed back to normal, but now I think his words were true because of my dreams,"
I said.
"Are those his exact words?"
asked Applejack.
"Not exactly, as I don't recall them entirely, but that was the general gist of it," I replied. "Maybe you should go home until at least this party has come to an end," suggested Applejack. "That's what I was thinking, especially because of one of the games that Rainbow Dash has brought to this gathering. Out of all of the video games that exist out there, why did you choose the sequel to the game that caused so much trouble?"
I asked.
After playing Ocarina of Time, and beating it many times over until I was bored, I just had to get my hands on the sequel. Besides, I'm not the only one who gets to try it out, as there are hundreds of students who are probably dying to play because they know how much of a classic it is. Maybe even some teachers and other staff members will want to play, so in that sense it's nothing but a win-win situation. I'll most likely let other people play before I get my turn, as I've got my heart set on some other games, and will no doubt ace all of them in a short period,"
replied Rainbow Dash. In a way, I can't really blame her for wanting to bring along the sequel, The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, for she showed so much passion about it, but I could blame her for bringing me here. I would have gladly left there and then, but I couldn't because leaving would have upset Pinkie Pie, and she was very passionate about her parties. Rainbow Dash may be the one who was presenting the occasion, yet Pinkie was the one who catered the affair due to being the premier party planner in the city.
"There's no point in arguing with her, Sunset Shimmer, for she is completely lost in the images of grandeur,"
said Applejack.
"Not only that, but Pinkie would be heartbroken if I were to just leave,"
I added.
"Oh yeah. I completely forgot that we all made a pinky promise prior to coming here,"
said Applejack.
"Which means I'm stuck here for several hours,"
I sighed.
"You don't need to actually leave the building, so you can simply keep your distance from where the action is. I'll explain things to Pinkie as I know she will understand, but my suggestion would be not allowing this dream to get in the way,"
suggested Applejack.
"I guess you're right,"
I said.
"Also, I'd keep it just between all of us as we wouldn't want to cause an uproar, right?"
asked Applejack.
"That's the last thing on my mind,"
I replied.
"Then just relax and have as best of a time as you can, Sugar Cube, but if you do change your mind and want to play some games, you'll need to get to them before a certain someone does, and ends up hogging it for herself,"
said Applejack as she winked at me before heading off towards the gym following Rainbow Dash, who had left a few minutes prior, leaving me on my own. I really wanted to have a good time, but something told me that I should have left even if it meant breaking a pinky promise. My friendship in this case ended up costing me, for a couple of hours later, things would change completely. The party had been a big success, which was natural given who was catering, and Rainbow Dash was hogging some of the games, although there were others she avoided due to not being in multiple places at once. Fluttershy was displaying her competitive nature, which I remember from a sleepover we had during the holidays, and she was defeating any and all challengers who thought they could beat her. Rarity, on the other hand, had been busy showcasing one of her newest dresses while playing some games on the side she felt reached out to her, and she apparently had a competitive streak as well, especially with one game that revolved around dresses and jewels. Everyone else I knew were having so much fun that I couldn't just walk out on them, for that would make me feel not only guilty, but also a bad friend, considering how they have all forgiven me for my past actions when I was acting like a bad girl. I had been sitting alone in the gym, and while people came by to say hi to me, they would quickly move on because the urge to play video games among other activities were too strong for them to ignore. I was okay with this scenario, for I needed some time by myself in order to think about what was happening with that dream. It was just a dream, and those can't hurt you. Such words would soon prove to be my undoing, for I would begin hearing a voice instead of my head. A familiar voice which I hoped I would never hear again for as long as I lived.
"Hey?"
I asked.
Ha. Am I hearing things, or is the noise in the gym really getting to me?"
I asked myself.
Ha.
This prompted me to get up and leave the gym in order to go to a secluded spot, and I was fortunate that no one paid any attention to me, otherwise they would have suspected me to be crazy or something. The voice continued tormenting me as it grew louder, which caused me to experience a headache, so when I reached a place where I could be alone, I concentrated in order to hear whose voice it was, and my heart sank when I recognized it.
"Do you think that you can simply tone my voice out from your mind? You have forgotten your place, it seems, child." "No. I don't want to listen to anything you have to say,"
I said with a defiant tone in my voice.
"You cannot ignore me, child, for you remember what happened during your exploits throughout Hyrule. Such things can never be forgotten, no matter how hard you try in a vain attempt to live out a pitiful existence. Do you remember my name?" "How could I forget the name of Ganondorf?"
I asked.
"Then you also remember how you were completely outmatched by my power, yet I have come to remind you of the warning I gave you when I allowed you to return to your life, given that I had been satisfied with the suffering you endured. Do you remember these words from our previous encounter? This other world is far more dangerous than what you've experienced here by far, so the chances of your survival are slim to none. You cannot escape from this fate which destiny has placed upon your shoulders, and the same can be said about the one who is viewed as being close to you. These words I desired to have burned into your memory, and your reaction shows you remember them. The time has come for you to go, and it shall be most amusing to see how much you will suffer,"
replied Ganondorf.
"You're nothing but my imagination playing tricks on me,"
I said.
I am not surprised at that response, for I knew you would attempt to deny your previous experience. Yet, there is something that you possess which shall remind you that what you experienced was a reality, and these words shall serve as an additional reminder. Fate has dealt this blow to you, and now you must face what lies ahead. You can rest knowing that you fulfilled one destiny, but know that someday you shall face your greatest challenge. It will hang over your head like a sword waiting to cleave the head off of your shoulders. Yes, my words have brought back the painful memories which you have tried so hard to ignore, but you cannot avoid the fate that awaits you. This time of peace has reached its end, and there is nothing you can do other than accept it,"
said Ganondorf. Hearing those same words back when he completely overpowered me brought back images that I would rather forget, but this wasn't the issue which really made me freak out. No, it was the glowing mark that suddenly appeared on the back of my hand. The same mark which was commented on by Pinkie Pie after I had woken up when I had hit my head as opposed to spending many days in a different world. Even though I couldn't see his face and determine it for myself, Ganondorf was laughing as he knew what this mark meant, and sadly I do as well. The mark on the back of my hand was the mark of the Triforce which was given to me back in the Temple of Time during the final stages of my journey. While I still believe myself to be unworthy to possess such a power because I wasn't exactly the embodiment of courage, I was chosen regardless, and seeing the mark appear on my hand meant my connection to the golden power remained. Had I taken such a power with me? The answer was yes, for this mark was my reminder. It then dawned on me that Ganondorf also possessed a piece which meant I was now connected to him, and just thinking about it made me sick to my stomach. My thought process at that exact moment was there was no chance that my mark could cause any kind of trouble, but I was wrong on all accounts, especially when it began glowing brightly.
"Why is it glowing?"
I asked.
"To inform you of what awaits,"
replied Ganondorf.
"Disaster is about to strike. I need to make my way back to the gym, and warn everyone,"
I said.
"Such words will hold no meaning in their ears, for they will not believe one such as you,"
said Ganondorf.
"After all of the strange things that have plagued this world, my warning will definitely resonate with them,"
I said. Ganondorf merely laughed, which annoyed me greatly, and then his laughter slowly faded away, which was a huge relief, but maybe what he said was true and that no one would believe me. He turned out to be correct in the end, as my story was known only to my friends, and trying to warn so many during something like a party would be next to impossible. Still, I felt that I could make a difference, so I quickly ran towards the gym. It didn't take long as most were already there enjoying the celebrations, and when I arrived, I found myself unable to get anywhere due to how many people were in my way. Rainbow Dash had been tearing up a storm by proving her dominance across several video games, yet she had been saving the best one for last according to various voices echoing across the gym.
"I know you've all been waiting to experience the Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask all evening, so now the wait is finally over. I know most of you are probably thinking that this is going to be a pretty lame game, but let me tell you that this is anything but that. I can guarantee that this will be the greatest experience ever,"
shouted Rainbow Dash.
"If you're done bragging about it, how about letting someone play it?"
asked Applejack.
"Of course, as I want other people to experience how awesome this is. Until I play it and beat it,"
said Rainbow Dash. I tried to say something that would perhaps convince her to play something else despite being so far away from her, but my words were muted out by the sounds of countless cheers coming from the student body. Even several teachers were cheering, which looked rather unusual, yet I suppose they want to have fun given how things got so intense during the friendship games. Rainbow Dash then stepped aside where she walked towards a table with Applejack where the rest of my friends were sitting, so I struggled to make my way over to them.
"Darling, you look as though you've experienced quite the tussle,"
said Rarity.
"I had to get through so many students just to get here,"
I said.
"Whatever is the matter?"
asked Rarity. I then explained what happened, and I was actually expecting my friends to give me confused looks along with the traditional huh that comes along. However, my words almost caused Pinkie Pie to freak out, but she managed to prevent herself from going off the deep end. Rarity then took a long look at the empty glass she had been holding for what might have been some time before putting it back down, and turning to face me.
"If this is true, darling, then things are going to get a whole lot worse, and we've just been through a hair-raising experience, what with the friendship games. Also, I don't think Principal Celestia and Vice Principal Luna would appreciate another magical situation given what our school has experienced these past months. Why did you have to choose that particular game?
I asked.
Relax. I'm betting that Sunset Shimmer must have had a nightmarish daydream or something like that,
replied Rainbow Dash.
Look. We know this party means a big deal to both you and Pinkie Pie, but we simply cannot ignore something that could potentially bring about some kind of destruction. Granted, I do feel that this does seem a little out there, Sunset Shimmer, despite what both Applejack and Rainbow Dash told us, but I suppose we could simply ask for some other game to be played. Surely, our fellow students will not protest against such a decision,
suggested Rarity.
But, I promised them something epic,
shouted Rainbow Dash.
I think we're all jumping to some kind of weird conclusion here, Sugar Cubes, so why we all just relax and take some deep breaths before doing anything else. I don't deny what Sunset Shimmer is saying because we've seen our share of strange events, but at the same time it is hard to believe, especially without proof. I'm sorry, Sunset, but believing your story, and believing something will happen are two completely different things,
said Applejack.
You think I'm lying?
I asked.
We all think that maybe you are having problems due to your lack of sleep these past months, and because of this your mind hasn't been in the best of conditions. I know my explanation didn't make a lick of sense, as even I don't get it, but the idea that this party is going to be struck by a disaster just seems plumb crazy. Your story is easy to believe, but the school being attacked just don't add up. It sounds like I'm just contradicting things, so I'll conclude by saying just relax and maybe get some sleep before going home,
replied Applejack. My heart felt like it had been struck by a powerful blow, for my friends refused to believe that a disaster was coming. If only they had chosen to believe me instead of ignore me, then things would be different than they are now, and it would have also meant Ganondorf being wrong, which turned out not to be the case. Students and teachers started to play Majora's Mask while my friends lined up for a chance, apart from Rainbow Dash, given how it was her game, and she wanted to be at the front of the action. I remained seated with my face looking as though I had experienced some kind of horrific event, yet how could I have any other expression when the disaster in question was about to make its appearance? Things appeared normal at first, which made me think that perhaps Applejack was right in that my imagination had caused me to feel disillusioned, but this quickly changed when Ganondorf's laughter echoed in my head.
They did not believe your words, child, as I expected from them, so now your one chance to prevent disaster has been crushed. Of course, you were never meant to stop what was to come anyway, for I had foreseen this event long ago,
said Ganondorf.
I still have a chance, I said. No, you do not, for look before you, and see what is about to transpire. Your fate has now been sealed, child, for now you shall venture forth to a world that lies on the brink of destruction. Whether you succeed or die is of little consequence to me, as it is the tremendous torment of yourself and those connected to you which shall prove most delicious to witness,
said Ganondorf. I then looked at the giant screen which Pinkie Pie had acquired for the party, and the image of the Majora's Mask game suddenly got distorted until it was replaced with what appeared to be a moon with an angry-looking face on it. This caused everyone to start gasping in horror, as no one aside from me knew what was about to happen, yet at this exact moment did I wish that I were somewhere else.
Know that you have not seen the last of me, child, as I intend on facing you in battle once again, for I desire the knowledge of seeing just how much stronger you will become. Do not betray my expectations.
His laughter echoed in my head as it quickly faded away, but my concern had to do with what was happening.
What is going on?
Asked Rarity as she and the other girls came over to me.
You should have believed me, I replied. This has to do with the disaster talk you heard in your head,
asked Applejack.
Shouldn't we pony up or something in the hopes of stopping it?
Asked Rainbow Dash.
There's nothing we can do, I replied. Now's not the time for a negative attitude, Sunset Shimmer, especially when we have terrified students here, said Applejack.
I sighed and told her that this was fated to happen according to Ganondorf, and that nothing could prevent the disaster from coming. Rainbow Dash quickly complained that her party was now ruined because of yet another disaster that comes from beyond their world, yet this one had nothing to do with Equestria, and involved the world of Hyrule, or whatever world Majora's Mask took place in. Upon looking back at this moment, I should have played it a couple of times in order to get used to what was about to happen. The eyes of the moon began to glow brightly before its mouth opened up, which brought about a powerful tornado which then began pulling everyone into it, and while I tried my best to get away, I found myself being pulled in, which resulted in me losing consciousness. You probably think that this is where things now stand, but you would be wrong about that, as something else happened. While I felt as though I had been dead for a long time given how bleak everything was while I was out of it, I slowly came to where I was immediately expecting Spike to call out my name, or the name of Link as he did before, but there was no voice calling out to me this time. In fact, there was pretty much nothing upon waking up apart from being in some kind of dark forest where I could hear the sounds of crickets chirping about. That's when I noticed that I wasn't walking despite moving, so I looked down to see that I was riding on a small horse. If I remember correctly from last time, this was Epona, but the younger version of her when she was just a filly, yet would she recognize me, or is this a different version?
Do you remember me?
I asked, although it sounded much worse in my mind. Epona then came to a stop before turning her head around to face me. She looked at me for a few moments before sniffing me, which must have been her way of figuring out if I was the one she bonded with during my last adventure, but I thought that to be impossible given this was a different game compared to what I experienced before. She then started to whinny at me, which prompted me to whinny in response, where she reared up onto her hind legs, which almost made me fall off and onto the ground, yet she remembers me based on the reply she gave. I guess it was still a good thing that I am in fact a pony, from a world filled with ponies, otherwise communicating with Epona would have been impossible. Thinking about what happened last time, I quickly looked down at myself, and sure enough I was wearing the same green tunic as before, complete with the hat, although without those fingerless gloves and tights. Looking behind me, I found a sword and shield were already strapped to my back, with the sword being very familiar to me.
This is... They... Kokiri sword if I remember correctly, so at least I am not unprotected, and I should feel relieved knowing that I managed to eventually figure out some of the basic sword skills. As for the shield, it isn't made of wood, which is another sigh of relief as it should protect me until I figure out exactly where in Hyrule this is supposed to be.
I said to myself. It felt weird knowing that once again my friends and the rest of the human world had been once again dragged into a situation all because of me, and that they now have been given new memories based on the world of Hyrule as depicted in this game, Majora's Mask, as opposed to Ocarina of Time, which is what I experienced before. From what I could estimate based on first impressions, I was riding on Epona within the confines of a dark forest, and having no idea why I am even here other than just because, so the question was, where exactly am I going? Another question is, what became of my friends when we were all brought here? The answer to the first question would remain an elusive one, but the answer to the second question would soon become a reality.
What's going on? This girl and her horse just decided to stop all of a sudden. Who would want to stop in the middle of this dark forest? Someone without any kind of sense. To be honest, I didn't wish we were here either, as this part of the Lost Woods is one that is rarely traversed by anyone. Why she insisted on waiting here for a wandering traveler was perhaps the stupidest mistake she has made. And now you need to apologize given that someone finally came along this route. We've been waiting here for days. That's just a small price to pay. I've been thinking. About what? Why are we resorting to attacking travelers on this route in the first place? It makes us appear as nothing but common criminals who are trying to earn themselves a small piece of coin at the expense of someone else. I mean, we could be doing something that doesn't involve thievery in order to make a living. Then explain that to the Skull Kid, as she insists that we do this because she feels it would be a lot of fun. Granted, I am starting to wonder if this is the right thing we should be doing, and she has been acting a little strange ever since encountering that woman. Then again, everything has been getting weird after she put that mask on, but hopefully she will give it back, or even throw it away once she has had her fun with it. Guess we'll carry out the plan by scaring that horse, and see what this girl has.
The dark forest continued onward as though it was never going to end, and it was constantly getting darker as a reminder that the sun wasn't able to reach down to the ground due to the thick tree branches filled with leaves above me. As Epona continued to trot forward, I began to experience some kind of memory which had never happened before, so it felt strange at first. In my mind, I could see several images flowing about that didn't add up apart from one consistency which involved Spike in the form of a fairy. Was I in this forest looking for Spike? If so, then why? What could have happened at the end of Ocarina of Time that would cause him to leave? I really should have finished that game given that Rainbow Dash kept on insisting, so now I've got another problem added onto a plate that was getting heavier with each passing moment. I was hoping to find someone on this dark path, and ask where exactly I was, as that would have given me a sense of reassurance, but I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen next, which began the downward spiral which led into me being transformed. Had I just decided to remain unconscious, and not attempt to be some kind of hero, I could have avoided so much trouble, but when you have a traveling companion with you, things get much more complicated. My mind was focused on where I was along with what it was I had to go through in order to change things back to normal this time, so I didn't even see the two fairies who came out from behind one of the trees. They quickly darted out in front of Epona, scaring her just by simply floating in front of her, and it caused her to rear up onto her hind legs again, throwing me off. I landed hard on my head, effectively knocking me unconscious, while my trusty steed just stood there, for she had no idea what was going on.
That worked out better than I expected. We didn't even need to make any kind of noises to scare this horse. Let's take a closer look at her just in case she is only pretending to be knocked out. It's strange tale. I feel as though I know this person from somewhere. What brought that up, Tattle? Her face reminds me of someone that I once knew, but it feels like that happened in another world entirely. You must have hit your head on a tree or two as we made our way to this clearing for you to think of that, so get your head in the game and see if you can find anything of interest on this girl while I give the signal to the Skull Kid that the coast is clear.
The white fairy then floated over to where I had landed, and started combing over me as though she were some kind of detective looking at a corpse, but she was fixated on my face for some reason which didn't make sense to me at the time. The black fairy in the meantime whistled into the distance where a strange figure walked into the clearing, and it was this person who would be the source of my current predicament, all because of what she was wearing on her face. This person was a Skull Kid, a Kokiri child who wandered deep into the forest where she transformed into what she looks like now. Why is that I could remember some things from my previous experience and not others? I guess my adventures in Hyrule really engrossed me into the mythos, yet not everything was of importance in my mind. The strange person then walked forward in an unusual manner before coming to a stop, and lifting up her mask as a means of getting a much closer look before putting it down again.
You two fairies did it. It was easy once she finally had her horse start moving again. What was up with that? I have no idea, but we should quickly search through her belongings before she comes to.
The person then walked over to me where the white fairy had been looking at my face this entire time, and it resulted in an awkward conversation between the two.
Tattle? Why are you staring at her face? She reminds me of someone that I've seen before, and I'm trying to think who it was. There are some images flashing through my head of someone who has a face just like hers, but nothing is adding up other than it giving me a headache. Maybe you should wait over there while Tail and I see what this girl has on her person that we can take for ourselves. You know, Tattle, you've been acting strange these past few days as though something were bothering you. Hopefully, it doesn't get in the way of what we're doing, for we'll be moving on to much bigger things once we're finished here. Right now, I've only been doing small things here and there as a means of making myself feel better, but thanks to the new powers which I've acquired, I feel that I can go even further to the point where I can bring an entire world to its knees. Why are we resorting to thievery? It's fun scaring people and stealing their things. Maybe, but have you considered what might happen were they to come after you? That woman whose mask you stole probably doesn't have the means to pursue you in order to get it back, yet I feel this girl here could. She's got a sword and shield on her person, and both show signs of wear and tear, so she must be an adventurer. Skull Kid, perhaps we should ignore her, and go back to the forest to wait for someone else to come. I just want to take a quick peek, and nothing you say will change my mind. Besides, I'm looking forward to returning home as I have something really fun that will change the lives of everyone. I want you to wait over there until I'm done, and I don't want to hear another word coming from you until we reach town. Your recent change in behavior is really starting to get me down, and I don't want your brother going through the exact same experience.
The person used her foot to flip me over onto my back where she proceeded to search my pockets, and quickly she discovered something that piqued her interest. I had no idea that I was carrying an important item, for if I had known then I would have made sure it was well hidden as opposed to just being in a pocket. She took out none other than the Ocarina of Time, yet why was it on my person? At the end of my previous journey, I had given it back to Princess Zelda, who was Princess Twilight Sparkle from my perspective, so theoretically it should still be in the future rather than here in the past.
It looks like we struck pay dirt this time. Wow! That's a pretty ocarina. And it's probably really valuable given how shiny it is. Can I try it? You're much too small to play something like this, and besides you are most likely to break the thing which would ruin the value. Then again, I'm most likely to do the exact same thing, so I'll just put this into my pouch once I've played it for a bit, and we can be on our way. As for this horse, I think we should take it as well, for I do like the idea of riding around from place to place instead of walking. It won't take long for me to get this thing under my control.
It was around this point where I started to regain consciousness, and I immediately placed my hands over my ears due to the poor ocarina playing that broke through the silence of the dark forest. Whoever was playing clearly had no idea how to play, so I got onto my feet where I noticed who was playing it. The person at first didn't pay any attention to what was going on behind her, but when the two fairies indicated that something was amiss, she turned around and jumped slightly because of seeing me back on my feet. I too jumped due to seeing what looked like a mask on her face, and it was the most bizarre looking mask I've ever seen. The large yellow eyes were perhaps the most distinguishing feature along with the two horns sticking out above each eye. Overall, the pattern made it look like some kind of weird monster instead of a mask, and there was some kind of dark power coming from it which I should have noticed, but didn't, which would eventually come back to haunt me.
What in the world are you?
I asked.
You're awake. I am now, after having been knocked out for a while, and it was your bad playing which brought me back to my senses,
I replied.
It's difficult to play a new instrument, especially when you wear a mask like I do, but that's not the point I'm bringing up here. I was thinking that you would be out of it for just a while longer, so that I could make a getaway, but it seems I underestimated you. Why would you want to run away from me? I was actually hoping to run into someone, and asking where exactly I am.
I said.
This is the Lost Woods. Really? It looks a lot different from what I remember.
I said.
Those clothes of yours are of the Kokiri tribe, yet you don't have a fairy companion which is the staple of their kind. That makes you either a pretender who is trying to pass herself off as one of them, or you lost your fairy due to reasons I don't want to know. Anyway, I don't need to be here anymore as I have what I want, so if you'll excuse me, I'll leave you to figure things out. Wait. I've still got some questions.
I shouted, and that's when I finally noticed she was holding the Ocarina of Time. My first reaction was one of shock, but then my second reaction kicked in where I displayed both anger and surprise as this person had just robbed me by scaring Epona. I suspected those two fairies were also involved, so I needed to get the ocarina back as it could be essential in figuring out how to change everything back to normal, and I'm not about to let a thief get away. I slowly moved a step forward so as to not give away my intentions, but the person noticed what I was doing, and took a step backwards which prompted me into moving forward again. That's when I decided to make a leap in an effort to grab her before she could run away, but she jumped in a manner that defied logic, and landed on top of Epona as though she were some kind of acrobatic star. She then kicked my steed in the ribs as an indication of wanting to get going, so now I found myself faced with quite the dilemma. I had about a few seconds to react, otherwise I could wind up being trampled over by my own horse. To be continued. End of chapter.